The thing about being the easy one in your family is that no one ever notices when you stop trying. They just assume you're fine. I was the easy one. I was the kid who didn't cry when my sister got the new bike and I got her old one. The teenager who didn't protest when my parents missed my school play for her volleyball game. The adult daughter who smiled politely when family trips somehow always revolved around Grace's schedule. So when my mom told me about this sister vacation, I didn't expect much. But even I wasn't prepared for the part where I wouldn't actually be staying with them. It was a Tuesday morning, too early for emotional ambushes. My mother stood at the kitchen counter with her latte, the kind of woman who looked like she'd been born in pearl earrings. She held out an envelope, thick and expensive looking, like it contained an invitation to another world. "Look what just came," she said. "Grace's wedding invitation. Of course. Amalfi Coast. 6 months away." Then, like a magician pulling a rabbit from a very predictable hat, before the wedding, we thought it'd be wonderful to have a girls' trip. Just us. A week somewhere tropical. I remember thinking, wow, they remembered I exist. Then she kept talking. "Turks and Caicos. A gorgeous villa. 2 bedrooms. Your father and I will take one, Grace will take the other, and, well, there's a smaller hotel nearby that's still very nice." Still very nice. The words hit like a cough drop coated in poison. "So, you want me to stay in a different hotel?" I said. Mom smiled the way people smile before delivering a vaccine to a toddler. "It's still lovely, honey. 4 stars. And Grace just needs her own space to unwind. She's been under so much pressure with her surgeries and the wedding. You understand." Of course I understood. I always understood. That afternoon, I sat in my tiny guest house behind their main home, surrounded by the smell of fresh-cut grass and someone else's idea of perfect landscaping, staring at my computer screen. The cursor blinked. My mother's words replayed. "You understand." And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't. Not anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of sprinklers outside my window ticked in rhythm like a metronome to the thoughts I was trying to ignore. My family was going to a luxury resort, and I was the overflow guest. Not excluded, just politely downgraded. The emotional equivalent of being told there wasn't enough room at the main table, but the kids' table had a lovely centerpiece. I opened my laptop and stared at a blank page in my design program. I was supposed to be working on a client logo for a startup. Instead, I drew a little outline of an island, one half labeled villa and the other, smaller side, hotel. I zoomed in on the hotel side and added a stick figure of me, alone, drinking a coconut with a frown. Then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. This was the pattern, wasn't it? Every milestone, every family event, every subtle reminder that I was the side character in Grace's main storyline. The supporting cast. The afterthought. I thought about the Christmas when Grace decided she wanted to be a photographer and got a professional camera set while I got a sweater. The year she casually mentioned med school, and suddenly every conversation became about her calling. And every time, I swallowed it. Smiled. Told myself it wasn't worth the drama. But that night, something shifted. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just done. I opened a new tab and typed, almost without thinking, "Best cities for graphic designers." Seattle popped up first. Green. Rainy. Artsy. The opposite of Los Angeles in every possible way. I'd always loved the rain. Grace used to complain it ruined her hair. I clicked through article after article, reading about design firms, co-working spaces, rent prices that didn't make me choke. Then my cursor hovered over a phrase I hadn't seen in a long time. Creative communities that value individuality. I stared at it until the words blurred. And then, softly but completely, something inside me decided I was leaving. Not next year. Not someday. Soon. Before they could hand me another polite rejection wrapped in family tradition. The next morning, the sun looked too clean for how unsettled I felt. I made coffee, watched the steam curl upward, and tried to imagine telling my mother I was leaving. I couldn't. Instead, I texted Sophie. We'd met 2 years ago at a design conference, bonded instantly over cheap hotel wine and our mutual allergy to corporate nonsense. She'd moved to Seattle last year and loved it. She'd been trying to convince me to follow ever since. Me. What would it take to move to Seattle in, say, a month? Sophie. Wait. Are you serious or having an existential crisis before breakfast? Me both. She called immediately. Finally. I knew it would take something dramatic. What happened? I told her everything: the villa, the separate hotel, the way my mom had said you understand like it was a commandment. Sophie didn't interrupt, but I could practically hear her eyebrows climbing. Good, she said when I finished. They've been writing the script, and you've been playing the sidekick. Time to grab the pen. It sounded cheesy, but it worked. By that afternoon, she'd lined up a friend looking for a roommate in Capitol Hill, and she promised to connect me to 2 agencies that were hiring. You'll love it here, Em. Everyone's weird in the best way. No one cares who your sister is. That night, I updated my portfolio for the first time in months. I added projects I was proud of, work my family had never even asked to see. And then, an email pinged back from one of Sophie's contacts. A woman named Claire at Zenith Creative wanted to schedule a video interview. Friday, 10 a.m. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding like I'd been caught doing something rebellious. Friday came fast. Claire was sharp, confident, and had purple glasses that made her look like she could smell bad design through the screen. We talked for 40 minutes. She loved my illustration work. She loved my sense of color. She loved me. When she said, "We'd love for you to meet the team next week in Seattle. We'll cover the flight and hotel," I froze. Seattle. Next week. It was happening. For the first time in my life, I was being invited somewhere, and not as a pity guest. I didn't tell my parents about the interview, or the trip, or the fact that my one-way ticket to Seattle was already sitting in my inbox. Instead, I listened to my mother plan Grace's sister getaway with military precision. She'd call me every evening to debate spa packages, snorkeling tours, and whether Grace should pack silk or linen. Every time, she ended the conversation with the same line. "You're lucky, Emily. You'll get some quality time with us before the wedding. Grace really wants this." It was like listening to someone narrate a dream I wasn't in. On Friday morning, I put on my best blazer, borrowed from a friend who actually worked in an office, and sat in front of my laptop. Claire appeared on screen with her purple frames and easy smile. "Good morning, Emily. Ready to meet the team?" The team was 6 people in a converted warehouse office, brick walls, hanging plants, and laughter echoing somewhere just off screen. They asked smart questions. They complimented my ideas. Nobody looked bored or politely indulgent. When it ended, Claire said, "We'll be in touch soon, but I have a feeling we'll be working together." I closed my laptop and just sat there. The room felt too small for how alive I suddenly was. Later that night, as I was washing dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Grace, Mom showed me the resort photos. Can you believe it? It's going to be amazing. Grace, maybe we can get matching swimsuits or something cute like that." Smiley face. Matching swimsuits. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the plate. Grace wasn't cruel. She was just born into a world where she never had to notice things like this. She thought inclusion meant throwing me a matching accessory while she lived the main event. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to my laptop and booked my flight to Seattle for next week, 3 days before the sister trip was supposed to start. As I hit confirm, the page refreshed, and it felt like a door somewhere finally opened. I stared at the ticket details, the seat number, the destination. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to belong. I was choosing where I did. The following week blurred into motion, boxes, emails, and a strange, quiet exhilaration that felt a little like falling in love. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the performance of disappointment. Instead, I began removing my life from the guest house one box at a time. My mom thought I was decluttering. My dad probably suspected more, but he didn't ask. He'd learned, over the years, that silence was the family's preferred form of denial. Each night, I packed another piece of my life into the trunk of my car. Sketchbooks, hard drives, the ceramic mug my grandma gave me, the quilt she'd sewn before she died. That quilt was the one thing in the world that felt like it belonged only to me. When I was 13, Grandma Evelyn took me to an art museum. Grace was at a volleyball camp, naturally. We stood in front of a Monet water lilies blurring into color and light, and she said, "You have an artist's heart, Emily. Don't ever let someone convince you it's worth less than a stethoscope." Mom used to roll her eyes when I mentioned that, but Grandma had seen me, really seen me. The quilt she made me was a riot of color, messy, imperfect, beautiful. I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, labeled the box necessities, and slid it into the car. Seattle wasn't just a move, it was a quiet rebellion. A declaration stitched together from years of second-place moments. A week later, Zenith Creative sent the official offer. Full-time position. Relocation support. Start date. 2 weeks. Claire ended the email with, "We're thrilled to have you, Emily. You bring something special." Something special. 2 words I'd never heard from my family. That night, Mom called. "Grace is so excited for the trip," she said. We've booked massages for the first day. Oh, and don't worry about your hotel, honey. It's lovely. I saw photos. I smiled into the phone, my voice calm. I'm glad, but I won't be there. What do you mean? I'm moving to Seattle. Silence. Long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then, sharp and disbelieving, Seattle? Emily, what on earth for? For me. I hung up before I could change my mind. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for walking away. The fallout began within hours. By morning, my dad had called 3 times, and my mom had sent a string of texts that started with confusion, detoured into guilt, and ended in subtle threats about family unity. Grace left a voicemail that began, "Mom's freaking out. Just call her back, okay?" and ended with, "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way." I didn't call anyone. Instead, I drove north, past the palm trees, past the city where every street reminded me of someone else's success, past the invisible boundary where obligation ended and possibility began. I crossed into Oregon by sundown, the sky pink and bruised, my car full of everything that mattered. The farther I went, the easier it was to breathe. Somewhere near Portland, I stopped for gas and realized my phone had 20 unread messages. I didn't open them. I just turned it off and let the silence rush in. By the time I reached Seattle, it was raining. Not the timid Los Angeles drizzle that made everyone panic, but a real rain, thick, steady, unapologetic. It soaked through my sweatshirt and into my hair as I hauled the first box into my new apartment, but I didn't care. The place was small but perfect, creaky floors, tall windows, the smell of old wood and paint. My new roommate, Hannah, greeted me with a grin and 2 mugs of tea. "You're the designer, right? Sophie said you're a badass." "Trying to be," I said, and for the first time, it didn't sound like a lie. That night, I unwrapped Grandma's quilt and spread it across the bed. The colors looked even warmer against the gray Seattle light. Outside, the city hummed softly, distant sirens, wet tires on pavement, life unfolding without permission. I lay there in the dark, listening to the rain on the window, thinking about how my family would probably be boarding their flight to Turks and Caicos right about now. Mom in her linen pants, Dad checking his watch, Grace glancing at her reflection in the airport window. And for once, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. It's been 6 months since I left. Seattle still rains like it's trying to wash the whole world clean, and most days, I let it. Zenith Creative feels like home now. The people there talk about color the way my family talks about cardiac surgeries. They argue passionately about fonts and lighting and campaign strategy, but no one ever makes me feel small for caring too much. Claire was right, my work fits here. I fit here. Last week, my first campaign went live, a series of illustrated murals for a local nonprofit that helps kids find their creative voice. They printed my name on the bottom corner in tiny letters, designed by Emily Hayes. I stood across the street in the drizzle, watching strangers take photos in front of it, and something in me went very still. That quiet, that impossible quiet that comes when you've finally arrived somewhere you were always supposed to be. The letter came yesterday. Handwritten, my mother's script neat and perfect as ever. She said they'd been hurt by how I left, but were glad I was doing well. She added, "Grace misses you," as if that was a peace offering. Then, tucked inside, a wedding photo, Grace in a lace gown, the Amalfi sunlight behind her, my parents beaming. I stared at it for a long time. They all looked complete. Without me. And that used to break me. But now, it just made sense. I slipped the photo into a drawer and went back to my desk. The rain had started again, gentle and endless, and my reflection in the window didn't look like the shadow that used to live in someone else's backyard. I was a woman who left, who built something new from the scraps of old hurts. I was the daughter who finally stopped trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for her. And as I watched the rain streak the glass, I whispered it out loud, just to hear it. I understand now. But this time, it wasn't my mother's voice in my head. It was mine.